I nearly died 3 or 4 times. I got hit head on by a car running across the highway, paralyzed from the waist down. I was working construction, fell off a 4-story building, and happened to grab a scaffold on the way down before I hit the concrete. And I had different events like that. And so I think I had a heightened awareness that life is really temporary. Fear establishes the boundaries of our freedom. So whatever you're afraid of, that becomes your limitation. If you're afraid of heights, you stay low. If you're afraid of people, you stay alone. If you're afraid of failure, you stay safe. And I can tell you, when I had stage 4 cancer and I didn't know if I was going to make it, and I had to have a 6-hour surgery, I didn't feel fear. It was the strangest thing I've ever experienced. And I look back and I tried to understand, why was I not afraid? And I think it's because most of us confuse fear for regret. What we're actually experiencing is massive regret. So I became a huge fan of humanity and just decided maybe my life is insignificant and maybe it doesn't have true intrinsic meaning, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give meaning to my life by making other people's lives meaningful.
Welcome back to the show, guys. I'm your host, as always, Sean Kelly, Digital Social Hour. Got an awesome guest for you guys today, Erwin McManus.
It's good to be here with you.
Man, I love your energy. Can't wait to get into this.
Oh, I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so happy birthday. I saw you just turned 65.
I did, man.
And you look great.
And I'm alive.
Yeah, you're alive.
You know, when I was your age, I thought 65 was basically post-dead. So I'm pretty jazzed to be alive. And honestly, I feel more excited now than I think I've ever had my whole life.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's amazing. You have to rethink it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm at the beginning of a new life. I feel like I'm starting some great adventures. I don't think I've ever been more innovative, more creative, more curious, more excited about life.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing to see, because at your age, a lot of people are retiring and they're getting ready to you know.
I know, that's so tragic.
Yeah.
And I don't even know why you would ever want to retire. I mean, to me, it's like you want to create.
Yeah. And
you might create till you take your last breath.
Right. So what awakened this spark for you at this age? Like, was it a specific event?
I think I've always been like that. And when I was around 19 years old, I nearly died 3 or 4 times.
Whoa.
And I got hit head on by a car running across the highway, paralyzed from the waist down.
Jeez.
I was working construction, fell off a 4-story building, and happened to grab a scaffold on the way down before I hit the concrete. And I had different events like that. And so I think I had a heightened awareness that life is really temporary. And so very early on in my life, I took on some what I would call like primal samurai values, and just always told myself, today is a good day to die. And I just treated each day as if it was my last day.
Whoa.
And allowed me to live a fairly intense life, a life of incredible adventure. I mean, I've been to probably 70 countries around the world. I've walked the streets of Damascus. I've flown into Pakistan. I've been in the most violent cities in the world, and I've sat with drug cartels and
Really?
yeah, in my 20s, you know, I cannot tell you how many times I was surrounded by Uzi machine guns and cocaine stacked to ceilings, and I was able to live that life because I wasn't trying to preserve my life. And since I decided that I would live my life in the most extremely beautiful, extraordinary, unexpected way possible, I think I died when I was early. And,
You had no fear.
you know, I did have fear.
Oh, you did?
I had no limitations because of fear.
Interesting.
I think that's the difference. Is I used fear to my advantage. Whenever I felt fear, I leaned in that direction and moved fast in that direction.
Whoa, because everyone else runs away from their fear.
Yeah, and I think that is why we live such small lives. Is fear establishes the boundaries of our freedom. So whatever you're afraid of, that becomes your limitation. If you're afraid of heights, you stay low. If you're afraid of people, you stay alone. If you're afraid of failure, you stay safe. And when you realize that fear establishes the boundaries of your freedom, the moment you press through those fears, now you have unlimited freedom.
That's so crazy. What a powerful message. So you accepted death at such a young age. I feel like people fear death their whole lives.
Yeah, I think they do too. I think 7 years ago I had cancer. I had stage 4 cancer. And I was finishing a book called The Last Arrow. And what's amazing to me is the day they told me that I had cancer, and my family was pretty shaken up, I wanted to finish editing this book, which happened to be called The Last Arrow, and I thought maybe this is my last book. And I opened up to edit, and the line I read, the very first line I read said this: I need to tell you before you hear it from someone else, I'm going to die. I wrote that line a year before. And I read that night when I learned I had cancer. But the next line was the most important line in the book. Right after I wrote, I need to tell you before you hear it from someone else, I'm going to die, but so are you. And that was the line I was trying to get to, that most of us live almost unconsciously pretending we're going to live forever.
Yeah.
And because of that, we do not treat our days with intense value. And I can tell you, when I had stage 4 cancer and I didn't know if I was going to make it, and I had to have a 6-hour surgery, that I didn't feel fear. It was the strangest thing I've ever experienced.
Wow.
And I look back and I tried to understand, why was I not afraid?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because most of us confuse fear for regret. What we're actually experiencing is massive regret for never having lived the life we long to live, for never pursuing great ambitions or great dreams. And I didn't have regrets. I felt like if this was the end of my story, I lived a really good story.
That's awesome.
And I didn't want to leave my son Aaron, my daughter Mariah, and my wife Kim. I obviously wanted to be here. I love life. I have no death wish. I want to live as long as I can, but I want to live. I don't want to exist. I think that's the difference.
Yeah. So would you attribute, because the survival rate at stage 4 is very low, right?
It's not high.
Yeah. So would you attribute just your mental strength to helping you through that process?
Yeah, I've heard some studies have said that about 50% of the determination of a person's survival is their mindset. And I remember when I had knee surgery years ago, I was in my 50s, and I wanted to find a surgeon that believed I could play basketball again. And so I kept going from surgeon to surgeon, because each one kept saying, hey, you're never going to play sports again. We're just going to help you walk.
Yeah.
So I found, I think it was Kobe Bryant's surgeon.
Nice.
And I said, look, I don't want knee surgery that helps me walk. I want to be back on the court. I want to be able to drop threes. I want to destroy 25-year-olds. And he said, we got you. And then I said, how long will the recovery take? And he told me a really interesting thing.
Yeah.
He said, the recovery process is really vast. Some people never recover from the surgery. Some people, it takes them up to 2 years. And I said, how long did it take Kobe? And he said, 3 months. And I said, how long will it take me? And he said, 3 months. Because we can already predetermine before the surgery how fast a person will recover based on their mental frameworks.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is a huge reason why I've written this new book called Mind Shift.
Yeah.
And is that most of our limitations are internal. And if we can destroy internal limitations, we begin to live our optimal life.
Yeah. So how did you shift your mindset to be so positive? Because you didn't always have that mindset, right?
No, I was a hyper depressed, very moody artist.
Yeah.
By the time I was 10 years old, I was in a psychiatric chair.
Whoa, at 10?
At 10. And I spent 6 months in and out of a hospital for psychosomatic illnesses. And I struggled with massive depression. And I was a straight D student. And I would disappear into an imaginary world. Even in school, I remember waking up one time and the whole class was gone because the teacher couldn't bring me back into a conscious state. I created a defense mechanism where I started living in this imaginary internal world as a kid. And I just detached myself from the world around me. My mom and stepdad didn't know what to do with me. They were going to send me to a psychiatrist to try to help me. And so early on in my life, I think I was mostly marked by an overwhelming sense that my life didn't matter, that I was insignificant, that I was just a speck of dust on the backdrop of the universe. And I'm not sure, I think it's true for many people. I know it's true for me. Somehow I moved into an existential crisis by the time I was 6, 7 years old, and I just wondered if there was any meaning to life. And I read every mythology book in the library by the time I was in 6th grade. I was 11 years old. And I was trying to search for some kind of legend or mythology to try to make sense of my existence. And
At 11 years old?
Yeah, and so I just became really despairing.
Wow.
And which I guess eventually drove me to college, where I became a philosopher. And I began reading Aristotle and and Plato and Socrates and I mean, just going through every philosopher through every era, trying to find out if someone had found the meaning of life. And so I was really driven. I would never put myself like in an intellectual category. I didn't feel like I was particularly smart. I just felt I was desperate and trying to find out if our existence was just arbitrary or whether there was any meaning to it.
Right, like a simulation almost.
Yeah, and so it drove me.
Yeah.
And I did have like a transformational journey for me. And when I determined that life mattered, and what I determined was that people mattered, and really, if nothing else in the universe exists, or in terms of a transcendent reality, matters are people. And I just knew that if I could make the lives of others better, if I could help end poverty or injustice, or help people achieve their greatest capacity, and so I became a huge fan of humanity, and just decided if my life, maybe my life is insignificant, and maybe it doesn't have true intrinsic meaning, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give meaning to my life by making other people's lives meaningful. And then in the midst of that, frankly, I came to a faith, and I became a follower of Jesus.
Nice.
And that became for me a shifting moment, because I thought, wow, if I could actually believe that the creator of the universe was aware of my presence and that my life actually mattered, then what excuse do I have for living a life that is small? And so it actually brought a significant change. That's not what it really meant to talk about today, but it's just where the conversation goes.
It's fascinating. So what age were you when all this happened?
I was 20 years old when I was studying philosophy, and I encountered the teachings of Jesus.
Nice.
And I wish I could say it was like this incredibly thought out intellectual discovery. It wasn't. It was a complete act of desperation of going, God, if you're out there, and I matter, I would love to know. And Jesus, if you're real, I'm in. And I think it was probably like the ultimate expression of subjective desperation, of saying, God, I don't know, but I know what it's like to live as if you don't exist. So I'd like to figure out what it looks like to live as if you do exist.
Love that. I've also seen you talk about energies. I'm a believer in energies.
Yeah.
I've seen you mention that it's easier to be attracted to negative energies than positive, right?
It's certainly easier to be shaped and fueled by negative energy. And, if we looked at humans as a product, right, that we were created to have functionality, we're really broken. And have you ever noticed that negative emotions stay with you, but positive emotions disappear really fast?
I have, actually.
Right. It's like, if you get angry, that anger stays with you.
It does.
People who are bitter, that bitter stays for years. That bitterness,
I've seen it for 30, 40 years.
It's incredible, right? But you have hope, and it lasts for 13 minutes. Right? You have an exhilarating, joyful moment. In fact, I think I can share this. I coach a lot of high level leaders, and one of the people I have the privilege of coaching is Sean McVay, the head coach of the Rams. And I asked Sean after he won the Super Bowl, I mean, the youngest coach to ever win a Super Bowl, youngest coach to ever go to a Super Bowl, and it just, without question, one of the greatest coaches that lives in our era. And I said, after you won the Super Bowl, how long did the exhilaration of victory last? And he said, about 10 minutes.
That's it.
And it was gone.
Crazy.
And then after that, it's the overwhelming weight of, can I do this again? Can I live up to the standard? Right? And is this going to be my pinnacle moment, and everything after this is going to be diminished because of that? And the reality is that positive experiences and positive emotions don't seem to stick with us as long as negative ones. And that to me became really interesting and significant, because I try to help people move out of negative moments. And we talk about being depressed. We almost never talk about being exhilarated, right? And we're even when you think about overthinking. I've been doing a lot of teaching on overthinking. We never overthink about positive outcomes.
Right.
When you're overthinking because you're running endless negative scenarios. You are never running endless positive scenarios.
Never.
You never wake up going, my company's going to make too much money. Oh my gosh, my relationship's going to go too well. Right? I'm never going to get health. I can't believe I'm going to get too healthy. I don't want to get in the gym too much, because what's going to happen if I get, too jacked and too healthy and too strong and too attractive? We're never overwhelmed by positive scenarios. We're always overwhelmed by negative scenarios. And so I started looking at this. Okay, what's going on in sense of the internal world of us human beings? And here's what happens: we fall into negative patterns, but we have to move into positive patterns.
Right.
You do not fall into positive patterns. You do not fall into positive thoughts. You have to move into positive thoughts. You have to move into positive behavior. And the same way, and to me, this is, I think, so significant. You fall into negative energy. You have to move into positive energy.
Wow.
So if you're going to bring negative emotions, all you have to do is just slip into it and fall into it. You don't walk into a room going, I'm just going to ruin the environment.
There's some people that are like that.
Yeah, maybe. At least they're being proactive. Yeah. But you're rarely going, I'm going to just destroy my relationship. I want my girlfriend or my wife just to have the worst day because I've had the worst day.
Right.
We transfer negative emotions because we do not take control over our inner world. You have to choose to bring hope.
Right.
You actually have to choose to be fueled by love. This is one of the things that would frustrate me as an artist. I've designed clothes and I've worked in the fashion industry for a long time. And I remember one time working with an artist and we developed an art center in Istanbul, Turkey together. And he asked me to do an installation in a gallery. And one day we were talking about art and his art was getting darker and darker and darker. And I remember asking him, I said, hey, what's going on? Why is your art moving into deeper and deeper darkness? And he looked at me and goes, I refuse to be inauthentic. I want to express emotions that are true. And that's why my art is what it is. And I remember saying or asking him, is it possible that positive emotions are also authentic and true? Like, is it possible that hope is also authentic? That love is also authentic? That compassion is also authentic? And he looked at me and he said, that thought has never occurred to me. And if you pay attention to the narrative of art, what we usually hear is to be authentic is to express negative emotions.
Wow.
To be superficial is to express positive emotions. And I want to argue that negative emotions are actually superficial. It's easy to get there. Positive emotions are actually deep. You have to pay a price to get there.
Wow.
Despair is easy for me. Hope takes work. Wow. Hate is easy for me. Love takes sacrifice.
Yeah.
Greed, it's easy for me. Generosity, it costs me something. I think we've created a false narrative because we want to make what is easy for us sound as if it's the most authentic expression of us. The most authentic version of me is one that's fueled by love, that's overwhelmed and captivated by hope, one that believes in beauty and truth. And one of the conclusions I came as an artist was that art does not need hope, but beauty does. You can create art without hope, but you cannot create beauty without hope.